All right, Mark Rogers TV talking SEC football, going to one of the sources that I can't imagine a much better source. We bring in Peter Burns from the SEC Network. Peter, thanks so much for joining us.
What's up, Mark? Yeah, I mean it's amazing because there really is football is I normally say 365 days a year, but this year it's pretty much 366 with the leap year. So football never slows down here, especially for us, the SEC Network and just SEC fans. They're so rabid, it's out of control.
Exactly. So I was in the middle of it for about 6 years in the late 90s. I covered Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Alabama. I heard you make a comment recently on a blog post or something just in regards to comparing the SEC and some of the other conferences. And so you've worked around the country. You've got the feel. So give us an idea of what it's like in the SEC versus, some of the very important football conferences, but they take a little time off.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because I grew up in Baton Rouge, where SEC football is not just a sport; it's basically a religion. And I had an opportunity to move out to Denver and do sports talk radio there. And when I first moved into town, obviously I knew about the Broncos, knew about the Avalanche, the Nuggets, the Rockies, but I really couldn't wait for football season to come around because I wanted to go up to Boulder to go see a CU Buffalo game. To see. They've had a Heisman Trophy winner. They've won a national championship. I'm like, all right, let's see what this Pac-12 football is truly like. And that was actually Big 12 back in whenever I moved out there. And it was crazy. It was so eye-opening because there's a great stadium. It's beautiful. But, I mean, the weather could not have been any better. And there was about 45,000 fans in the stadium. There was no tailgating. There was just not that grew up in. Now, come to realize I grew up in probably in Tiger Stadium and Saturday nights in Death Valley. So, Mark, you know what that's like. I mean, that was like giving a 16-year-old keys to a convertible Bentley for his first car. Like, I didn't understand how good I had it there. So, I mean, it was kind of interesting to see, just how rabid the fans are in the SEC, but then not only at CU, but when I was in LA for a little bit and watched just even the great times that Leinart and Bush had. I walked into a sports bar one time when the year, I think it was maybe 2003, and USC is playing, and it maybe was on 25% of the television. I mean, it didn't register with me that college football isn't the end all be all.
You know what tells you a lot is that when the SEC went on its run and then it ended last year with Ohio State and Oregon playing in the national championship game, I remember seeing the ratings from individual markets. And aside from Columbus, Ohio, and maybe somewhere else, all the highest viewership was still coming from the SEC watching college football that didn't relate to the SEC. It's crazy. I remember one time, and we could tell stories all night. I was driving back from Ohio, driving back to Mississippi when I worked down there. It's the middle of June. This is the deadest time. No spring football, no recruiting, no nothing usually. Yeah. And they're in the middle of an Alabama-Auburn debate, like fierce debate on the radio in the middle of June. It never stops.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the crazy part about it. I mean, I forgot something at the studio earlier today, so I went by and I hopped in Feinbaum's show. Paul Feinbaum was doing his radio show, and I mean, it is here we are in March, and you would think that we are in mid-October in the middle of SEC because just the amount of passion these fans have it. I think that what led to some of the success of the SEC network was the fact that there was, not any longer do we have people that just crave a product, right? Like I crave Chick-fil-A. I love Chick-fil-A. I eat it all the time, right? But so inundated with television anymore that, we crave maybe Netflix, we crave some other things that are going on, but for SEC fans, that was the power of why we got in so many homes right off the bat was because people, they had to have it. They absolutely had to have SEC football because, like we talked about, it is a year-round thing.
Yeah, and I kind of work at the core of that, Peter. So I'm in operations and production operations. So when we launch the networks, we're right there, digging right in there and getting the technology sorted out in the workflow. And to your point, when ESPNU, which has been hugely successful, launched about 11 years ago, I think they had 15 million subscribers. When the SEC launched, it was already within 10 to 12 million of ESPN2 and ESPN. It was out of the gate. 85, 90 million subscribers, ready to go. Hadn't seen anything, what this brand could deliver or anything, but we're fully on board. We're going to watch it all the time, and we're ready to go. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, we're having such a good time. And I mean, the thing is, for me, I'm really lucky in it simply for the fact that I grew up as a fan. You know, I didn't grow up as a journalist. I didn't grow up as a broadcaster. I kind of lucked into sports talk radio by winning a contest back in the day with Fox Sports Radio. And I literally was kind of like an American Idol type thing for Andrew Siciliano. Andrew Siciliano, the NFL Network, he was actually hosting that show, and it was with him and Tony Bruno, who was one of the launches of ESPN Radio back in the day. They did a morning show on Fox Sports Radio, and they had a contest called Be Andrew for a Day. I ended up winning it as a fan, and when I came back to San Antonio, I said, I can't. I got to quit my job. I got to get into sports talk some way, somehow. So I, left a very good history and went to the sports radio station and said, I'll take any job you have. And so they said, okay, let's see what you're about. So they gave me a phone book and a cube, and they said, learn how to sell sports talk radio. And, maybe one day we'll put you on air. And, luckily we're here 10 years down the road.
And I know, Peter, that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg in regards to your story and your journey. So if we can kind of tease some people, I would love to have you back at some point, do a show with Macy Golder on Thursday nights. We do segments throughout the week. Would love to have you back to talk about some really interesting highs and lows in your career, kind of where you arrived here. Got some SEC football people that watch this channel as well. So let's kind of kick around some coaching changes, because it's amazing how those guys are CEOs or governors, however you want to phrase it, within those states. And now we've got Kirby Smart taking over after a 15-year run for Mark Richt. Of course, Will Muschamp kind of surprisingly just gets a second chance in the same division very quickly after a couple years at Auburn, or just a year at Auburn, removed from Florida. So kind of the storylines revolve around the coaching and the quarterbacks typically in college football. What's kind of catching your eye?
I mean, for me, I think the idea that Kirby's handed just an unbelievable program, and caught up in what Mark Richt had done in that career out there was fantastic. I mean, he's going to get Nick Chubb back. He's going to get Jacob Eason, who he was able to keep as a star recruit, because when Fox was looking, when Coach Richt obviously went to Miami, there was a lot of people that wondered if Jacob Eason was going to flip. Would he go to Miami? Would he go to Florida? And really kind of decommitted, and he ended up staying with he committed to the G. He committed to Athens. And that was a huge play for Kirby Smart, because Smart's in a great opportunity right now because the East, again, is still down. We'll talk about Tennessee here in a little bit. The East is not the West. It hasn't been for several years, and really since Nick Saban got to Alabama, and since Urban Meyer left Florida, there's been that power vacuum to move to the West. And, Kirby Smart has a great opportunity. And I mean, what he learned from Nick Saban. So he's doing a lot less media. He's not letting his other coaches talk. So, he learned the Yoda, the Jedi master ways of Nick Saban. And I think that's going to do him very well in Athens.
Yeah, Peter, as strong as Florida, Tennessee, and Georgia have been traditionally, if we would have had this conversation in the mid to late 90s, or even up to, like you say, Urban Meyer leaving Florida, it would have been a bit ridiculous to think the imbalances where the East is winning like 2 or 3 games a year out of like 15 or 16 games against the other division, and the championship game results speak for themselves. Missouri won back-to-back titles. Now they don't expect to be a player. Kentucky's always down. Vandy's always down. Tennessee seems to be the emerging power, the team that's on the cusp because of the great recruiting classes and the young talent that they have emerging. And they were razor close last year to winning huge games.
And I was actually really shocked that Butch Jones got an extension before this upcoming season. I was absolutely shocked. I mean, I know everybody gets an extension when you sneeze in the SEC, for whatever reason. But, so much has been based upon the success of corner. Is there more interest? Absolutely. Did the team look a lot better than it did did under Kiffin or Philip Fulmer? Yeah, I think so. But he was also getting paid well. And what happens isn't a 10-win season like it should be up at Rocky Top. He's basically failed. You know, if Butch Jones only wins 8 games this season, people are going to be, frankly, really upset. And so I think that was one of the bigger shocks to me in the offseason. But really the fact that the SEC actors have found a situation where they hand out extensions like it's like you and I would hand out, candy corn come Halloween. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So a lot of pressure for him. And then, of course, there's been so much off the field as well in Knoxville that it's going to make one of the more intriguing seasons probably in the last maybe 20 years for them.
And Peter, a lot of guys take over 5-win programs and they're able to make that small jump to 8 wins because they clean some things up and make it happen. But for you to make that jump from 8 wins to 10 or 11 to contend for a championship in the SEC, you're now having to beat like 10-win teams, top 15 teams to win those extra 2 or 3 games. And that's going to be a more difficult climb for Butch Jones to make. Again, they were this close to making it this past year, but couldn't close the deal a number of times against some good teams. Let's hit on the West real quick.
Real quick, I just went back to, I just took Mark, and I got an opportunity to go up to Missouri. And of course, that's another SEC East team that has been kind of, had a great 2-year run, had so many off the field issues this last year. But I really came away impressed with Barry Odom, who's taken over that position, because that was one of the really hard jobs that not a lot of people, I think, unless you truly were a Mizzou man, a guy that understood everything that happened in the locker room, understand Columbia, understand all the factors at play. They needed somebody like Barry Odom, and he's just a football player. And I really appreciated, him coming right off the bat and really being open and honest with us. I don't know if they're able to compete now, but as far as a leader of men, I feel that Barry Odom, the job's not going to be too much for him. That was a great hire up in Columbia.
Peter, I'm glad you jumped in on Mizzou, because what Gary Pinkel did, I think we have to understand a few things. When they came in from the Big 12, and they were typically a 7 or 8 win team, they jump out once in a while, but typically 7-5, 8-4 kind of teams in the Big 12, I thought. And they went 1-7 that first year, and they were getting beat up. And I thought, man, this is a bad move. They're going to be downtrodden in the SEC East. And then on top of that, you look at the recruiting rankings, and you know it about as well as anyone. Out of ESPN's 300 recruits, the top 300, every SEC state had multiple kids coming out of that footprint, except Mizzou this past year. And that's not an aberration. That's every year. They've got to go elsewhere to find players, and they don't have the brand name. And so they're climbing a big mountain. And Gary Pinkel, wow, the job that he did to get 2 back-to-back, even albeit a down SEC East, was quite an accomplishment. Just to hit on the West real quick here, Peter, before we let you go. The LSU situation is interesting because the gold standard's Alabama, and LSU considers itself right there. And if they don't hit that, then people get a bit uptight. And I don't have an issue with that, because these guys are making $5, $6, $7 million a year. So I don't think the standard's ridiculous that you have to win championships and compete for them. It's kind of interesting that they're the one team that seems to be solidified, at least in regards to personnel at quarterback, running back, and wide receiver, unlike any other team in the SEC. But that's where the question mark still is at quarterback for LSU.
Yeah, it's still with Brandon Harris. I mean, Harris came in as a freshman and really, showed a little bit in his first year. Then last year, beats out Anthony Jennings. But there was a question mark of arguably one of the best running for Walker since Bo Jackson and Leonard Fournette. The passing lane should be open. I mean, coordinators like this that can take it had a lot to do with Cam Cameron's offense. And for Cam Cameron, it had everything to do with he was a great offensive coordinator for Zach Mettenberger. Remember, just more of a pocket passer, pro style. They're caught in between a rock and a hard place. They want an athlete that can move the pocket, but they also want a pocket passer. And I think for Brandon Harris, they have to decide, who is he? Is he a pocket passer, or is he a guy that could be more athletic? And I don't think LSU is committed to that style offense yet. They don't even know what offense they want to run. With Mettenberger, he had the mobility of you and I in the pocket, so to make sure they threw it to Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. Well, now they've got side, but they're trying to run a kind of a scroll athletic offense. They don't know if they really want to do it. I think that's been the commitment issue that Cam Cameron and a lot of LSU fans have felt a frustration with over the last couple of years.
Peter Burns joining us from the SEC Network. Peter, hey, it's been great. We could talk SEC football all night. I could be firing questions at you until you're ready to nod off. So I appreciate you coming on. It's been a good time, and again, would love to hear your career story. Hopefully, we can get you on back sometime down the line.
Easy stuff, man. Any time we could do this twice a year. There's two, so anytime. Mark.
Good stuff, Peter. Thanks so much. Talk to you later.
All right, man. Thanks.